After escape, something else usually appears. Not relief for long, not resolution, control. The experience becomes uncomfortable. Contact weakens, attention moves away, and then, almost immediately, the mind begins to rebuild structure. It wants to know what happened. It wants to restore order. It wants to reduce uncertainty. It wants to stand somewhere solid again. So it starts working. It explains. It organizes. It evaluates. It decides. Very often, this activity feels intelligent, responsible, necessary, stabilizing. But this is not the same as understanding. It is the reconstruction of control. Something felt too close. Then contact was interrupted. And now the mind tries to recover stability by building a framework around what happened. A reason, a conclusion, a plan, a position. This movement is subtle. Most people do not notice that control returns this way. They think they are simply thinking things through, processing, reflecting, getting clear. But often, the mind is not trying to understand. It is trying to feel safe again. And safety, for the mind, often means structure. If the experience can be named, it feels more manageable. If it can be explained, it feels less open. If a plan can be made, it feels less uncertain. This is why control reappears so quickly after discomfort. Not because the mind is strong, because openness still feels dangerous. The experience was not completed. The escape interrupted contact. So now the system looks for another way to reduce instability. It tightens around thought. This is where control begins to take shape again. Not as force at first, as organization, a movement toward order, a movement toward explanation, a movement toward mental structure. And because this feels cleaner than raw experience, it is often welcomed. The mind says, "Now I understand. Now I know what to do. Now I can regain balance." But balance built this way is often fragile because it is built on distance from experience, not contact with it. The feeling was not resolved. It was first escaped, then organized. And organization can look very convincing. It gives the sense that something has been handled. But often, nothing has actually settled. The body is still carrying activation. The unfinished sensation is still there. The original movement is still incomplete. Only now, it is surrounded by thought. This is why mental clarity can coexist with internal tension. You know what happened. You have a theory. You have a narrative. You may even have a plan. And yet, something in the system is still not at rest. Because explanation is not completion. Structure is not release. The mind rebuilds control because control feels safer than open experience. And that rebuilding usually begins before it is recognized. A thought forms, then another, then a conclusion, then a direction. Very quickly, the system moves from rawness to management. This is the moment to observe. Not when control is already complete, but when the mind first begins to close around what happened. The first inner tightening, the first need to explain, the first sense that uncertainty must be reduced immediately. That is where reconstruction begins. Not outside, inside, quietly, automatically. And because it is automatic, it rarely feels like control. It feels like clarity. That is what makes it so difficult to see. Once this is seen, something changes. Not because the need for control disappears, but because it is no longer confused with understanding. The mind may still move toward order, toward explanation, toward conclusion. But now, that movement can be felt as it begins, not as truth, not as wisdom, not as clarity, as reconstruction, as the system trying to feel stable again. That distinction matters. Because when control is mistaken for clarity, it is trusted completely. Its explanations feel final. Its conclusions feel necessary. Its plans feel exact. But when control is seen forming, its authority changes. You begin to notice that the mind is not opening, it is closing. Closing around uncertainty, closing around sensation, closing around what was still unresolved. And this closing has a very particular quality. It feels efficient, focused, sharp. There is relief in it, a sense of, now I know, now I can proceed. Now this makes sense. But often, what has returned is not understanding, only containment. The open experience has been reorganized into something narrower, something more manageable. And manageability feels good to the mind. It gives the impression that the problem has been reduced, that what was loose is now held. But being held is not the same as being resolved. This is why control must keep rebuilding itself again and again, because what it produces does not actually complete the original experience. It only surrounds it. The system feels this, which is why mental structure often needs constant reinforcement. More thinking, more reviewing, more explaining, more deciding. The mind keeps working to preserve the control it just built. If it stops, uncertainty returns. If uncertainty returns, the original discomfort can be felt again. So thought continues, not because it is revealing more, because it is preventing collapse. This is why control can become so tiring, not only because it is effort, but because it is maintenance. It has to be maintained, precisely because it is not natural resolution. Natural resolution does not need maintenance. A sensation completes, a wave passes, a reaction settles, but control does not settle. It stabilizes temporarily, then asks for more structure, more certainty, more narrative, more positioning. This is where many people become trapped. They believe their ongoing thinking means they are getting closer to truth. But often, they are only getting deeper into reconstruction. A better explanation, a tighter framework, a cleaner conclusion. And each one feels like progress. But the body remains tense. The breath remains altered. The system remains subtly activated. This is the sign, not whether the explanation sounds good, whether the system has actually softened. That softening cannot be manufactured through thought. That is the real shift. Not that the mind never rebuilds control again, but that you begin to recognize the moment it tries to. And once that moment is visible, the system is no longer completely ruled by the reflex to tighten. There is still movement, but there is also space. Not the space after thought, not the space before reaction. The space before structure closes over uncertainty. That space is enough to change the entire tone of experience. Because now, the system does not have to choose between raw chaos and mental control. There is a third possibility: staying open a little longer, long enough for the experience to reveal itself without being immediately managed. That is where reconstruction begins to loosen, and where something more honest than control can finally appear. This is inner cognition.